CRISPR is a novel piece of technology that was created in 1993 and has since been quickly applied to develop risky experiments. A lab rat that has been modified using CRISPR in the present day has destroyed the whole crew on board a space station. The only survivor is Dr. Kerry Atkins, who is asking Energyne's executives, those who created the CRISPR mutagen, for assistance in getting back to her home. CEO of Energyne Claire Wyden issues Kerry a directive to either return with the mutagen samples or not at all. When Kerry returns for the samples, the rat monster pursues her. She manages to reach the escape pod and is set free as the station explodes while the rat is still inside, but the damage is severe and the damage to the pod causes it to break open, depressurize, and explode, killing Kerry. The samples themselves fly away across the country. At the same time, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character, primatologist Davis Okoye, directs his colleagues Nelson, Connor, and Amy to an enclosure housing apes in an animal refuge in San Diego. They watch as Pavo, an ape, seeks out a female ape to mate with, but Davis separates them. Until Davis gently calms him down, Pavo is upset. Connor freaks out and upsets Pavo when an albino gorilla named George enters the room at that precise moment. Pavo chases after Connor until George knocks him over. Pavo is terrified by George until Davis engages him in conversation. Davis finds George to be amusing and regards him as his best buddy. Amy tries to invite Davis out for drinks after work, but he politely declines. Then Nelson comes up to him and queries why he has a stronger connection with animals than with people. According to Davis, animals just get him. The mutagen samples begin to arrive that same night. One of them lands in George's cage, another in a Florida river, and the last one in a forest near a group of wolves. While a crocodile consumes the entire sample, a lone wolf is sprayed with the gas and George is also doused with it. The following morning, Davis is contacted to inquire about George. George is in the grizzly bear enclosure, according to Nelson. There is a dead bear there, and George is running away in terror. He shows Davis that the bear attacked him first because of a scratch mark on his chest. George emerges, having reached a height of 9 feet. The country has been struck by the mutagen, according to news sources. Both Claire Wyden and her brother Brett, as well as Kate Caldwell, watch the news on television. Claire is glad that the mutagen for her Project Rampage experiment is successful, while Brett is relieved that they are not losing as much money. In order to deal with potential outcomes, Claire suggests they hire a private military group to fix things. Because Kate claims to work for Energyne and was involved in creating the mutagen, she may be able to prevent George from developing. So she goes to the animal sanctuary to attempt and talk to Davis about what happened. George is imprisoned till he becomes increasingly hostile when they try to find him. In the end, he escapes from the cage and terrorizes everyone inside the refuge by running amok. Just as the police show up, Davis chases after him. They shoot at George until Davis is able to reason with him. Things worsen when a helicopter flies overhead and begins shooting tranquilizer darts at George until he falls unconscious. Burke, the commander of the military team in Wyoming, sends them into the woods to retrieve the mutagen sample. Burke gets in touch with the Wydens to let them know the container is empty. The group finds dead wolves lying on the ground and a sizable paw print as they venture further into the forest. The mutant wolf, known as Ralph, then comes across them and attacks as he rushes through the forest.
The squad fires at him, but it is ineffective since Ralph kills each member of the team one by one until just Burke is left. He commands the helicopter to fire at Ralph, but the wolf lunges out of the trees and destroys the helicopter, sending it tumbling into the lake. Ralph then corners Burke, who makes one final stand before being eaten by Ralph. Harvey Russell, a government agent, shows up at the sanctuary to transport George aboard an aircraft and keep him hidden from the public. Kate and Davis are also brought in for questioning. Russell believes they have everything under control, despite Davis' claims that having George on the plane amounts to suicide. Russell explains on the air that Kate had been fired from the Nergine after attempting to steal research from the labs, for which she had served 13 months in prison. Russell had looked into Davis and Kate's records. Davis then realizes that she was lying and that she is powerless to save George. When Claire hears about the wolf incident, she turns on a radio frequency that summons the mutant creatures. To reach a Nergine, Ralph and the crocodile, also known as Lizzie, travel to Chicago. Despite being kept unconscious, George is able to hear the frequency and begins to awaken. He erupts in a fit of wrath and destroys the cage. As Davis tries to protect himself and Kate, he strikes the agents. Russell is only knocked out by George after Davis steps in to save him from killing Russell. When the plane's turbine fails, it begins to descend. As the aircraft crashes to the ground, Davis equips Russell, Kate, and himself with parachutes so they can jump out. After landing, the three discover that George survived the collision and is heading into the city. After learning more about Kate, Davis makes it apparent that he doesn't trust her. She explains that when her brother was diagnosed with cancer while she was working with a Nergine, she hoped that CRISP would be able to cure him until she discovered that Claire had been using CRISP to create lethal weapons. Kate attempted to steal it but was apprehended and sent in jail. Then Davis tells her how he discovered George. A terrified young George was hiding under the poacher's vehicle when they killed his mother. As soon as they fired their first shot at the poachers, Davis and his men killed them and found him. Russell gets up, and is thankful to Davis for saving his life, so he decides to help him and Kate. As George and Ralph travel toward Chicago, a military squad that is keeping watch on them is met by Davis, Kate, and Russell. They understand they must find a way to control the animals since they are being called into the city. Russell assists Davis and Kate in stealing a helicopter so they can enter the city. When Lizzie, Ralph, and George arrive in the city, there is a complete rampage. As the creatures begin tormenting the city, Davis and Kate arrive. They travel to a Nergine in search of the antidote because they are aware that they cannot stop them on their own. In the midst of the mayhem, Davis lands the helicopter, and they rush into the building. When they arrive at the lab, the Wydens discover them first, and Brett holds them at gunpoint until they reach the lab with the antidote. The two are informed by Claire that the antidote will merely lessen the animals' increased hostility rather than restore them to normal. Before taking Kate with her, she grabs the revolver and shoots Davis in the abdomen. The Wydens try to get on their own helicopter to flee with their supplies and Kate, but the monsters begin ascending the tower. Brett flees after George ascends to the top and smashes the helicopter. Davis saves Kate after escaping the gunfire, but Claire is pressuring them to assist her. Instead, Kate takes a bottle of the antidote that she found and places it in Claire's bag, while Davis diverts George for a short period of time. George snatches Claire and eats her along with the antidote after Kate strikes Claire and shoves her in his way. Brett, meantime, is about to leave when he encounters Russell, who has somehow arrived in the city quickly. He demands that Brett return the laptop that contains his research so that he can go. Brett gladly agrees and rushes out the door, only to get sprayed inconveniently by a piece of falling debris. Ralph and Lizzie succeed in reaching the top, while Davis and Kate wait for the cure to work, while George continues to cause destruction. Davis and Kate climb aboard the Wydens helicopter to ensure they have enough air to prevent any significant harm. The tower is brought down to pieces by all of the creatures. Davis and Kate make it out alive, and George makes it out of the wreckage looking like his old self again. Davis and George believe it's time to terminate this since Ralph and Lizzie are continuously causing trouble. In an effort to stop the military from carrying out an airstrike to kill the monsters, Kate joins Russell in the effort. George fights Lizzie and Ralph. He throws Ralph around, but Lizzie is the biggest and most durable of all of them, and the wolf can fly and shoot quills. Ralph is tricked into flying in his direction by Davis, who then moves and allows Ralph to fly into Lizzie's path. Ralph gets grabbed by the throat by the croc, who then chews off and swallows his head. Lizzie is too powerful for George to punch, so she throws him into a pole, impaling him. Davis tries to take Lizzie out with the chopper's cannon and a grenade belt aimed at her neck, but they barely hurt her. When George leaps into the air carrying the rod, he rams it into Lizzie's eye and runs it through her head, killing her at last. Lizzie pursues Davis and almost eats him. The military colonel ends the strike after observing what transpired. After appearing wounded and dying, George later reveals that he was simply playing a joke on Davis. Wondering where George's new residence will be, the heroes make their way out of the city.